Alrighty. My name is Tanner Faber. I've grown up here in Dallas, New Mexico for basically my whole life. My dad is a teacher at the high school, an ag teacher at the high school actually. And anyways, I've grown up around agriculture my whole life and basically been farming. And what I'm doing my presentation over is bankruptcy laws. And obviously in the kind of community that we're in, which is heavily involved with farming and stuff like that, I've heard of previous stories that, say for example, other farmers or other businesses that have gone bankrupt, and even in some cases that the previous owner has actually ended up coming out all right, to say the least. So furthermore, I'm going to get started. Alright, first question, what exactly is bankruptcy? Bankruptcy allows people such as couples and businesses that cannot meet the previous obligations that were agreed to be paid in the loan agreement. In your previous loan, you obviously in a business, you have to have money to make money. And nowadays like this, very few times is a kid ever granted $1 million, and they have this huge intentions of going and creating this big successful business. And then in most cases around that, people obviously have to go and get a loan and start up money and stuff like that for a business. And within that loan, if things cannot be paid back, obviously things like bankruptcy can occur. In addition, the business person or couple, for example, can be excused actually from repaying some of the debt, or even in some cases completely be wiped free of all the debt. That's pretty often. That actually does not happen very often. The more often one is that the owner of the business, for example, is excused from paying some of its debts. Bankruptcy is actually a federal law in which the state cannot intervene or legislate. In addition, there are several business types of bankruptcy that person, couple, or business, for example, the person can file for. And there's several different types of bankruptcy. You got Chapter 7, Chapter 11, 13, 12, and 13. But I'll start on some of them. Now, in the actual filing for bankruptcy, it involves submitting a petition to the court saying that you can't continue paying off the loan, or your business is, due to the economy, has started dwindling down. And that's when you put into that piece of paper in your petition saying why you simply cannot repay the debt. According to HG.org, the fee is close to $300 for your petition, the submission of your petition for most personal bankruptcies. That paper will include concerning amounts of the money that the person has obligation towards, whether it be numerous loans or simply one big lump sum of a loan that the person or business cannot continue to pay. In addition, this is also a sworn statement in which the debtor includes all of his assets, all of his income, types of income, current debts, previous debts, basically everything about yourself and your business, for example. As a court is to read over the documents, and then a court hearing is held to determine the outcome of the bankruptcy. And with that being said, depending how far under you are, or say for example if you're still pretty well off, you're more than likely going to end up paying more of your debt. The overview of bankruptcy: an individual cannot file under any other chapter if during the proceeding of 180 days. And actually, this is basically the core concept for each type of bankruptcy. This is basically what you have to qualify under, and in order to file for bankruptcy. But an individual cannot file under any other chapter if during the preceding 180 days a prior bankruptcy petition was dismissed due to the debtor's willful failure to appear before court or comply with orders of the court, or is virtually dismissed after creditors sought to relieve them from bankruptcy court to recover property in which they hold liens. That's just liens. The liens are obviously just the things that the bank basically still owes. What was that? In addition, no individual may be a debtor under any chapter of the Bankruptcy Code unless he or she has, within 180 days before filing, received credit counseling from an approved credit counseling agency, either an individual or a group briefing. There are examples of emergency situations or where the U.S. trustee or bankruptcy administrator has determined that there are sufficient approved agencies to provide the required counseling. If a debt management plan is developed during required credit counseling, must be filed with the court. And with the credit counseling, that's just you're going to basically counseling for your debts. You're learning how to repay those debts. You're learning how to go forward with your bankruptcy plan. There are several different types of bankruptcy, but the two most basic types of bankruptcy is Chapter 7 and Chapter 13. Most common, which is Chapter 7, which is readily available to the business and consumer that is needed to file. Chapter 13 simply lists and reorganizes your debts owed, in which you agree to repay a certain amount up to all of your debts, depending on what all you owe, based off your given income. Chapter 12 is mainly appointed towards agriculture to help certain people have seasonal incomes, like certain types of farmers and say fishermen, stuff like that, kind of more on the agricultural side of things. Chapter 11 is similar to Chapter 13, however, it is mainly for people involved with larger corporations or wealthier individuals, in which they plan to organize the debt situation in hopes for keeping the business alive, in which creditors are paid over time. And with that being said, the larger corporations obviously are worth a lot more than, say, for example, a little mom and pop business in Portales, New Mexico. And there are several very well-known people like Donald Trump, the rapper 50 Cent, and those, just to name a few, are some of those that have filed for Chapter 11 because they have enough money and enough assets that the bank can't just kick them to the curb, needless to say. Chapter 7, Bankruptcy and Debt. Filing Chapter 7 bankruptcy is also called straight bankruptcy, in which all non-exempt assets are passes over to a trustee who will begin to sell the assets and begin to pay off the creditors. They exempt properties that are not able to be taken and liquidated by the courts are those like household items, clothing, basically essentials you need to live, basically. And also, one that I found that was pretty neat was tools for working. Basically, they can't take any tools. Say if it'd be good if you knew how to do construction or something like that. You could start up something again, if needless to say. Creditors are paid off simply with that they're able to collect. Most times, not all the money is paid back in full, and the debtors' debts are wiped free and forgiven. In some cases, creditors have tried to collect debts that have already been forgiven face severe penalties by federal law, meaning that, say, this asset can no longer be taken by a federal court, or the creditor tries to step in and sell off an asset that has already been deemed that the creditor can keep, and anyways, they're trying to sell it, and bad deal. Dismissing, you're left to fend for yourself. Businesses and smaller corporations are obviously likely to file for Chapter 7. According to USCourts.gov, it states that a debtor's current monthly income is more than state median. The Bankruptcy Code requires an application of a means test to determine whether the Chapter 7 filing is presumably abusive. In other words, if they're basically filing it to just completely benefit themselves when they know they can bounce back. Abuse is presumed if the debtor's aggregate current money income over 5 years net certain statutory allowed expenses is more than $12,475 or 25% of the debtor's non-priority unsecured debts. As long as the amount is at least $7,025, the debtor may reboot a presumption of abuse only by showing special circumstances that additional expenses or adjustment of current monthly income. Unless the debtor overcomes the presumption of abuse, this case will generally be converted to Chapter 13. With the debtor's consent, obviously, or it will be dismissed. Chapter 13 bankruptcy is filed when the debtor is allowed to apply for a new payment plan or term. Chapter 13 bankruptcy is also known as the wage earners plan. During this term, the debtor is paying back old debts at new rates and in new terms, obviously, from the previous loan agreement. A proposal is announced to the creditors either 3 to 5 years in the future terms for payment of all the debts issued. In addition, debtor actually may not have to repay all of his or her previous debts. There are some benefits to Chapter 13, obviously. I mean, you got to file for which one you obviously qualify for and what's going to end up working best. But most of your belongings you're still able to keep, like equipment, housing, and vehicles, as well as other goods that you or your business may still be able to use for a benefit. With these assets still available, you're able to work and pay back your debts at new interest rates and new terms. I actually know of a guy here in Petalis that was a farmer. I'm not exactly sure what he filed under, but in other words, he was able to keep a lot of his assets and stuff and continue to try and keep farming, and eventually he ended up coming out pretty good, ended up coming out a lot better than, say, not filing for Chapter 13 and absolutely all liquidations of all of his equipment. You obviously have to be eligible for Chapter 13 as well as the other ones. Some of them are any individual that is operating an unincorporated business is eligible for the Chapter 13 bankruptcy. If the unsecured debts are less than $383,175 and the secured debts are less than $1,149,525. In addition, these debts are often changed or adjusted by the federal government to equal out in the economy to help with inflation rates. In some circumstances that are not eligible for Chapter 13 bankruptcy are those involved with a corporation or a partnership. However, they will be determined by the courts. On the contrary, people cannot file for Chapter 13 or even under chapter or even any other chapter for that matter if the preceding 180 days they didn't continue through with their filing of bankruptcy, and it'll be dismissed due to obviously the negligence of the debtor. In addition, the assets can also be lawfully taken by the creditors due to the fact that just simply the negligence of the debtor. Chapter 12 bankruptcy is mainly for farmers and fishermen who have somewhat irregular income. It is much more streamlined and simple than other chapters of 13 and 11 due to the fact that they simply do not have that current income, but they obviously have enough assets to back what they're doing. Under the bankruptcy code, family farmers and family fishermen fall into two categories: an individual or an individual and spouse, a corporation or a partnership. Farmers or fishermen falling into the first category must meet each of the following future criteria as the date and petition filed in order to qualify for under the Chapter 12. Obviously there's some of them right there, but I want to go off onto another note is that I actually heard of a case here in Roosevelt County that a cattle rancher, or he's actually a farmer, but he ended up buying a bunch of yearling cattle to raise on a wheat crop. And anyways, I'm not exactly sure what happened. Obviously didn't want to go and ask the guy in person to interview him, but needless to say, he tried to do some type of insurance claim, and he basically stated that he had, say for example, 500 cattle out there, and the insurance company actually went and looked at the field and there was only about 300 out there. So needless to say, that was obviously a very unethical decision on his part, and he definitely paid for it severely in the long run. As far as I know, I think he may still be farming, but I mean, they basically took him for what his word, just to his unethical decision of just trying to make money off of insurance. This is more in depth of the basically Chapter 12, the family farmers, as well as some of the criteria that it entails to qualify for it. Example for this one: a family farmer, at least 50%, a family fisherman, and at least 80% of the total debts that are mixed amount, exclusive of the debt for the debtor's home, must be related to the farming or commercial fishing operation that is being, say, produced at that time. More than 50% of the gross income of the individual or husband and wife for the preceding tax year, or family, farmers only, for each of the second and third prior tax years, must have come from the farming or commercial fishing operation. Obviously, it all has to be tied into the business. It has to be all within the farming operation, because some of the other farmers must, some of them have different businesses, and it all has to entail with farming. Here's chapter 11. Is much like chapter 13, however, is mainly appointed towards larger earning, more money. These terms and conditions are reorganized and evaluated, much like I said before on how, say huge corporations like some of Donald Trump's stuff, which was, I believe it was in 1991, the Taj Mahal was filed under chapter 11, as well as some of his other ones. He's actually one of the only ones that have ever filed for chapter 11 bankruptcy as many times as he has. He's filed for it 4 times, and but however, he hasn't actually filed for personal bankruptcy, which is pretty amazing on his point, because it's just a business within his business that is filing for bankruptcy. So he hadn't, of course, he's probably had a little bit of a hurt from it, but I mean, it hasn't taken him for what he's worth, to say the least. Here's obviously chapter 11 in depth. For the bigger corporations, it is obviously for corporations with heavy debt burdens. The purpose for chapter 11, there's a plan set in action to continue producing revenue of the business, to keep it running, to keep it going, to keep trying to produce money, but then however they just reorganize the whole loan payment term and plans and stuff on just simply trying to keep the business alive, because there's so much money, so much equity and stuff or not equity, but so much money that's tied up within the business. It's, I mean, virtually impossible just to throw it away. There's several chapter 11 requirements, but one of the main ones is the courts are required to charge $1,167 case filing fee and $550 miscellaneous administration fee. The fees must be paid to the clerk upon filling, or may, with the court's permission, be paid individual debtors in installments. Bankruptcy court miscellaneous fee schedule limits 4 number of installments for the filing fee. The final installment must be paid no later than 120 days after filing the petition. For cause shown, the court may extend the time of the installment provided, but then it obviously goes back into the 180 days if they don't file. That it's they're kicked to the curb, basically. Here's already some famous people that filed. Like I said, Donald Trump has filed 4 times. Rapper 50 Cent has filed for Chapter 11 as well, fairly recently. At one point, he's worth $144 million and doesn't have a whole lot much more to his name. Mike Tyson is another big one, and over his 20-year career, he's made over $400 million, but he didn't spend money very wisely and ended up forgetting about debts, basically, and it just snowballed from there. And with him not fighting anymore, he's obviously not making much more money. But here's some of the works cited. I got also one from our book that I needed to put up there, but another one that I used was hd.org/bankrupt. And another one that I found real helpful too was uscourts.gov, and finding a lot of the rules and regulations. And then I also actually went and talked to some local people and local businesses that they have actually filed and stuff. And anyways, like some of the local farmers that I talked to, that they had actually been coming out all right from it. You know, I mean, it stinks having to do it, but I mean, needless to say, they came out all right. Anyways, that's about it. And if you have any questions or anything like that, be sure to comment or get back with me. And sure appreciate you watching the video. Thanks.